Welcome to my talk, building a viral open source AI chatbot. I really hope you enjoy this. It's been quite a fun few months, so it's nice to share with you guys here. Cool, so firstly, who am I? I'm an AWS Community Builder. I work at a consultancy called Aleios. I also do a bunch of open source development stuff, mostly with AWS, but with loads of other stuff. We do Quivr, Genos, Orion tools, there's loads of stuff going on. And I run the Serverless London meetup in London, and GenAI days in London, Paris, and New York, which is kind of cool. So just quick show of hands on the room. There's a lot of chat about GenAI at the moment, but who's used GenAI? Show of hands? No one? Even ChatGPT? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, cool, nice. Google Bard? Yeah, a few hands. And GitHub Copilot, Midjourney, there's a bunch of other stuff going on. But these are the first commercial products. But I'm much more focused on open source. I really like open source. And what we're going to talk about here is how we built Quivr. So Quivr is your virtual second brain in the cloud. This isn't a product pitch. We don't make any money from this. You can go check it out. It's on GitHub. It's free. Anyone can use it. It's imagine ChatGPT, but you can teach it new things. So it's very similar to some of ChatGPT's new updates where you can upload documents, but Quivr you can upload a serious amount of documents. Pretty much anything you want to upload can be uploaded and used as a full knowledge graph. And this is out the box functionality. Anyone can host it. Anyone can use it. Open source. All good fun. And it went pretty viral on GitHub. So we had we're now up to 22,000 stars. I think when I wrote this talk, it was it was at 16, a month ago. So we've gone a bit crazy. It was been trending for 2 weeks on GitHub, the #1 trending project on GitHub for about 2 weeks. And yeah, we have 18,000 users regularly using the demo app, which is free hosted, and sort of 800 daily users. Whenever I can't do a live demo because we're in the afternoon. As soon as the US wakes up, our site crashes. So there will be a little video, but the concept's super simple. We basically take your documents and we do a bunch of stuff with them. We'll talk through some of this in a bit. But we answer questions over your documents. That's it's the most basic thing. It's number 3 of things you want to do when you first start messing around with AI and embeddings and all this sort of stuff. And there's a real tiny video here. Hopefully it's running at double speed. Let's just run this at double speed. It's 20 seconds. So essentially we upload some documents, a README file. I think this is the README for Quivr. And you can go to quivr.app to try this out. And there we just have a chatbot very similar to ChatGPT. We can ask questions. Now we have streaming and stuff. This was a few weeks ago when we made this. And essentially just tells you what was in your documents, but not it's paraphrased. It's much more condensed. You can give Quivr a personality. You can tell that he's Shakespeare and he'll write you in Shakespeare prose. It's quite interesting. But I'm not super excited about the product is very cool. And the product now has become a UX problem. But I like building back-end infrastructure. So we're sort of on the back burner now when we're moving forwards into UX. So it's a really good time for reflection. It's what did we learn about building this product that went to, I think all in it was 50,000 people over the last 2 months from nothing. And so we had some serious challenges. And the first one was it was open source. And this is a challenge for more than one thing, but it's mostly a challenge for us for the technical side of things, because any one member of our community had to be able to build and run the project locally. So we couldn't do what I normally like doing, is messing around with Lambda, with serverless functions. We couldn't do any of this stuff because we couldn't rely on anyone having an AWS account or a Google Cloud account. We couldn't rely on anything. We were okay, you have to be able to run this with one command. So yeah, no knowledge or special hardware. We had local models, so you can actually plug Quivr into local models running on your own machine. But we had to have some very stringent guide rails about who could and couldn't run local models. Otherwise, we'd start breaking stuff. And so yeah, number 1 here was no serverless functions, which was really sad because I'm a big serverless advocate. And yeah, big sad. And we were sort of falling at the first hurdle here because we've taken us out of our niche serverless, and we're we're building a product here that we can't use that sort of stuff. So we fall back to trusty old Docker. We're running the demo app on Fargate, so it is kind of serverless, I guess. And we have our database is Supabase. Does anyone use Supabase here? Yeah, Supabase. It's really cool. The idea is you build something in a weekend and you scale to millions or something. I don't know. They have a really good tagline. They're fully open source, so you can run this stuff locally. If you really wanted to run the Postgres database locally, you could pull Supabase and run it locally. But most people are using the hosted version of Supabase. So, but we give them that functionality, that like flexibility that you really look for in open source technology. And the second challenge, this was like really the most important challenge for us, is you can't please everyone. So we spent a long time flitting backwards and forwards between different things. We have lots of people submitting pull requests, lots of people submitting issues. They're like, what do they want from the project and what do we want from the project? And those things weren't necessarily aligned all the time. And it's hard because they're doing like what's free work for you and you're like, oh, I really want to merge this stuff, but it's going to break some other functionality in the future. So this was a bit of an issue. Yeah, so don't try. You're not pizza. The main problem we had here was there's so many different LLMs on the market, so large language models. There's so many different APIs that we could have used, and we also had local models running. So at the beginning, the creator of Quivr, the first guy that touched the repo, he was like, okay, we're going to support everything. And so like we're doomed to failure at this point because there's no way a dev team of like 5 people can, and like non-paid dev team of like 5 people can deal with all of these different APIs. We were supporting like basically every Hugging Face model that was up there, like all the Llama models. We're supporting Google's Vertex AI, like Azure, OpenAI was like the start, and now we're supporting Bedrock. And it was like super, super difficult to keep track of all this stuff, mainly because everything has different context windows. So if you know about context, it's the amount of data that a model can take and the amount of data it can give back. It's like the sum total. So we see there's like some big differences. So Falcon, which was like one of the best open source models at the time we were building Quivr, has 2,000 tokens. This is sort of around about like 5,000 English words. But Anthropic were publishing models with 1,000K tokens. So like it's very different limitations per model, and we had to account for that in the architecture. It made things very, very difficult. And we actually spun off a completely different project, which we co-partnered with LangChain, called Genos GPT. And the idea behind this was anyone could replace OpenAI with one line of code. They changed the endpoint and they can replace OpenAI. And this was super interesting. Mostly because it gave people flexibility, but we spent so long building this, it detracted us from the core product of Quivr, which was to make a good personal assistant for anyone to use. And like make it, Stan, who made it, it's like, I want my grandma to be able to use this. It's like, currently we started it and we're techies and we started it and built it for techies, but actually we want everyone to be able to use it for it to gain a little bit of traction and popularity. So distracting ourselves with this, we missed the core problem, and we're failing on our little Ninja Warrior game. So I guess like one like piece that we can give is like listen to user feedback. User feedback's really, really important, but because it's open source, you're going to have so much noise. You're going to have so many like people submitting issues, so many people actually doing free work, and a lot of this is just noise. You have to be very quick about categorizing, is this good or is this detracting from my actual product? So block out the noise, maybe don't stick a box on your head. And sort of like the last little thing on this point was know your product. So when we started Quivr, we had no idea what it is. There's a really famous scene in Social Network where he's like, we don't know what it is yet. But like we were reenacting that. It never got that far, but it's kind of interesting. We had no clue what was going on. So I really would recommend one of these like product type workshops. The Netflix workshop's a big one. And they ask you a load of booky questions like, if you met your product at a cocktail party, how would you describe it? And it's like, that is a really weird question to understand, especially as a technical person. You're like, oh no, but like I'm looking at the APIs and this and that. Like we don't care. We only care about the end functionality. That's all the user sees. So have them have a nice experience. And with open source, that really leads you to have strong governance on your product. Because someone's taking you someplace, someone's taking you other place. You need to know when to say no and when to push and say yes. Strong governance, strong roadmap. Some projects do this with bug bounties and things like this. And then the last thing, I was waking up in the morning to like 20 people submitting pull requests from China. And it's like half of it's in Chinese. I don't understand it. I'm like, what do I merge this? Do I not merge this? Like, what do I do with this? I didn't have any faith in their pull requests. So we built a bunch of other tools. One of them was a code review tool, which actually we just use Quivr to review Quivr code. And we have this like meta-ception of like AI going around in circles, hallucinating to Sentry, which is like terrifying, but also wonderful if you can actually just use the initial output from this and be like, it can categorize it very well. Is this good or bad? And then from that, you can be like, right, no, what actually does need changing? Like this can tell you if you're going to break your app, but maybe then you need to go in from the product aspect and be like, does this move my app forwards? So yeah, we built this. This is actually like a product. It's also open source. It's free. Code Review GPT. It's an NPM package. Yeah, you can pull it. And that's all. Like the third challenge was we didn't plan for any growth. We started this like it was the back end was 200 lines of code. It was built with Streamlit. If anyone's used Streamlit, I would really recommend. It's like a UI framework in Python. You can write your back end, your front end in the same file. It was literally 200 lines of code, the first iteration of Quivr. We built it in an afternoon. And that went to 5,000 stars on GitHub, like within a week. And so we were like, oh, wow, okay, we need to build something proper. But then we didn't build something that could go to 100,000 users. We built something that could maybe go to like 5,000 users. And there is a big distinction there because we accumulated so much tech debt. And very early on, we tied ourselves to Supabase. Supabase is awesome. We talked about earlier. It's this like back end as a service. We were using their database. We were using their auth. And it was really, really cool. But we tied ourselves so much to it. And we had like no ORM on top of Supabase. We had no repository structure. There was like a really big issue where we were so tied to this. We were like, oh, we don't care. We love Supabase. And until we didn't. We were also using it as a vector store. If anyone's done any AI dev, they'll know about vector stores, but we're going to cover them in a very quick moment. So vector stores. We were using Supabase to store vectors from AI, from like the AI models. And we have to know what vector stores are for the moment, but there are like lots of different types of one. And we were just using PG Vector, which is an add-on for Postgres, which means you can store things in vector format. And this is like a Google Trends from, I think, ages ago. Probably should have updated that, but it's Milvius, ChromaDB, and there's like a bunch of other ones. There's like everyone's been making a vector store at the moment. You probably see down LinkedIn, like every fifth thing is, oh, we've just made a new vector store. We're going to be the newest one. Cool. We want to try some others. We want to give our users functionality to actually try some more, but we were so tied to Supabase. Like everything was a direct call to Supabase, and this was a bit of an issue. So we wanted to support multiple vector databases. Neon being the big one that we wanted to support, and actually the Neon developers actually had to help us with this. This was like a 5,000 line PR. It took a week to merge. It was a pain. And because we just didn't plan for it. We like had no idea. We were like, oh, like we're just going to make this. And then you make this, you make this, you make this. You never plan for what the end result is going to be. And so this was an issue. So I would change that. But like very quickly, we'll just go down a very small rabbit hole of LLMs. What is a vector store? Vector store is a place to store your embeddings. What are embeddings? Why should we care about embeddings? Well, embeddings models are like the kind of dark horse of generative AI. They don't really get talked about much. You mostly talk about completions models, which is what ChatGPT is. Embeddings models allow you to get the semantic similarity of chunks of text. What does that mean? Semantic similarity, it's like you can represent your vectors, your like chunks of text, so your sentences here, in a X dimensions space. And then if you take the distance between those vectors, you can sort of see how close in like meaning those phrases are. It allows you very easily to get context from documents that might be relevant to your query. And that's mostly what it's used for. In something called RAG. So this is like an RAG process. A user submits a query to an embeddings model. That query gets embedded. Then you also have documents that get embedded, and you find the similar pieces. So maybe you have a query and what you're looking for is the answer in the documents. And that's what you look for with those embeddings. You supply both of those things to the generative model, and the generative model just goes, yes, this answer from this question. Okay, right, just return the answer in a way that's easy to understand. And that's all this is. This is RAG. And we have some learnings from here. So like we build the MVP, but we never planned for this product sensation. Like it wasn't a sensation, but it went quite large. So next time we would plan for it. And challenge 4, I promise you this is the last challenge. Huge lack of documentation, lack of tooling around generative AI. If you want to like actually start building something, you want to like make something, you're like, oh my God, where do I start? There's literally nothing. And there was even less 5 months ago when we started this. There was absolutely nothing. LangChain and like a bunch of other things, Pinecone, these things had all been around for quite a long time. Databases, like they'd all been around, but for different use cases. There wasn't actually like docs like, oh, you can use this SDK to do this. There's like, they talked about the S3 API endpoints in the last talk, or the talk before, and they're very well established. Like there was nothing established. Like a completions endpoint wasn't a thing. And mostly what wasn't a thing was actually you have all these settings on a lot of these retrieval chains in LangChain, and like you just don't know what to put for them. So, and you have no options like of what to put for them. You see some things online, you're like, oh, maybe we'll try this thing, but not even in the right ballpark. And one of these things is chunking. So chunking is, we looked at embeddings previously. Chunking is actually how long that sentence is. So how big is that chunk of text? And this makes a huge difference because you've really got to think about a few things. Like, what is your target knowledge? Is it like a long legal document or a tiny tweet? Like how big is it? And what is your query? What is the user actually going to do? Just back to knowing your product. Like, what is the user going to do? Are they going to search what is the contact number, or are they going to search summarize this 5,000 page document in 3 words? Like, these are 2 very different queries, and they require very different amounts of context and very different summaries. So, like some rules of thumb: you have a long document, and you're doing summaries, then you have large chunks. If you're a short document and you're in specific questions, you have small chunks. If you do somewhere in the middle, you have somewhere in the middle. And this is all about like guesswork and a lot of testing. So like LangChain, if you know who they are, they've done quite a bunch of stuff to do with like file type aware chunking and a few bits and stuff, but we're so far away from the point where this is a good user experience or a dev experience. Like there's so many possibilities to actually make some content aware chunking. And prompt engineering, there was like a big craze a few months ago where it was like, oh, prompt engineering is going to be like the next job that earns like, I don't know, £500,000. And maybe it won't be, but it really does matter. Like we broke our app so many times where it was just returning the wrong stuff, and then a downstream service broke because of it. And because you have no control over what this generative model is returning, and this is one of the issues. So there's big opportunity for tools here to make your prompts better. So there's some tools, there's like Langsmith, you can like rerun a lot of your queries, you can change things. It's very cool. It's in open beta, I think, so anyone can use it. But yeah, it came out sort of a few weeks ago. The LangChain guys are really, really cool. They're some of the fastest developers I've ever seen. And they have very good ideas of where they want to go. And this is their way to monetize their ecosystem that they spent the last like 4 years building. So this will become a SaaS product, but currently it's very free. And sort of my last-ish point is around testing. Testing generative models is something that is not talked about because everyone's terrified. If you bring up the testing game, they'll just have no leg to stand on. This is my opinion anyway. Generative AI models are by their like very definition non-deterministic. You put the same thing into ChatGPT twice on 2 different days, or even like 2 different queries, you'll get 2 different results back. And they might not necessarily even look the same, like at all. They might be completely switched around. They might even return different knowledge. And so how do you test for that? How do you test if 1 comma in your prompt, as happened with us, broke your app for 3 days? Like just 1 comma in our internal system prompt broke our app because suddenly the model was like, I don't understand what you mean. Why not? It's 1 comma. It was a big problem. How can you have confidence in your application? And so this is one of those other things where we kind of had to reinvent the wheel, looking at past processes that people have done. So we actually built a whole testing framework. This runs in our CI. And this is for testing code review GPT, so the other product that we also built. And basically we take a lot of the like common test cases. We run them through, well, actually, I think I have a slide. Yeah, we take a lot of the common test cases. We run them through like the whole flow. We calculate similarity between the outcomes of the test cases and like some examples, and then we work out if they're pretty similar. This is again making use of those embeddings models. Embeddings are like they're like the black sheeps of Gen AI. I think they're some of the most underutilized, and they're really, really useful. And this has some sort of human review process in here. We're not trying to replace humans at any point in this process. I don't think anything's good enough yet. We need way more tooling in there before we can like 100% rely on these things. So we've always put in a place for human review. And if you want to, I saw some people taking photos of that slide. If you want to actually have a look at that article, that was a colleague of mine, Fabien. He wrote this article for Gen AI Days. So yeah, I'll just give you a second. But yeah, you can find it if you go to the Gen AI Days blog. And it's all about how you test non-deterministic applications. And I heard last week that they're using this internally in one of the biggest observability platforms in the world. It's something not quite like a cat, but maybe. So what's next? Well, what's next is we actually did build a product, and the product is very, very usable now. It's actually really kind of cool. Like we built a product, it's online, it's free. Anyone can go and like have a go use it. And now it's a UX problem. How we refine that product, the actual APIs for the back end are pretty much done. Like we'll benefit from any continual improvements that some of our like service providers do. So it's like for infrastructure, it's on AWS, and if they like make it faster, our app will get faster. That'll be great. If LangChain improves some of their loaders or retrievers or like any of the building blocks we've used to put this together, we'll also like benefit from that. So it will get better from that point of view. But from the front end, it's very much a UX problem now. We've solved the actual technical problem. And so like, how can anyone else get started? The really cool thing about looking at this now rather than 5 months ago is what took us like a month will take you like an hour because it's all online. And this is like thing that happens all the time. But LangChain published some of their cookbooks. OpenAI published some of their cookbooks. Just like scripts that you can start. You can go all the way through. They're really interesting. There's so many open source projects you can have a look at. You literally just sort by most viewed or trending on GitHub, you'll find some really quite small projects. There's one called Private GPT. It has 85 lines of code for the backend. 85 lines of code, and they raised like a silly amount of money that was in the millions from 85 lines of code that's public. It's like, actually incredible, but you can just go and have a look at it. That's the beauty of it. And newsletters, workshops, there's all that sort of stuff happening. And the future, this is like right at the end. What do I think is going to be exciting in the next few months, and like what am I like looking forward to put more emphasis on? I think the first one is like foundational models. AWS Bedrock will become out of general availability hopefully quite soon. Will become into general availability out of private beta. And this will be really cool because it'll allow more enterprises that we work with to actually gain confidence that they can run these models more in production. But to do this, we actually have to make a bunch of dev tooling. And some of that will be to do with function calling, so we can get the model to return JSON. This is like a big deal, not returning broken JSON. The amount of times that our models have returned broken JSON because we can't enforce that. Now we can with function calling. Dev tools, there's like things like we talked about earlier, like prompt engineering, some sort of feedback mechanism for that, where a user can feedback that this was a really bad response. And then that does some asynchronous process on the back end to update their prompt in semi-real time. That would be really cool. Thinking of making something like this. And there's loads of things that we can do that could turn into future startups. I think we're in a really interesting space. And if you sat through the whole of my like talk and you've never used like even ChatGPT, you've never had like a eureka moment where you're like, actually this might save me even just 5 minutes of my day, then I really would encourage you to go and have a look, because everyone I've spoken to has had that moment. Even like one of the co-founders of my company, he came up to us in our office like 2 days ago and was like, well, I literally just had that moment you were talking about where this just saved me 3 hours. And if you haven't, you probably will, from my anecdotal experience. And the last thing is, if you're building an application, this is actually the last slide. If you're building an application and you're thinking about shoehorning OpenAI into your application for giggles, basically, just don't, because it's going to make your user experience worse. You suddenly have gone beyond the realms of determinism, and you're going into like non-deterministic, crazy land. And so, really, only use it unless you, only use it if you can't do without it. And that is like my number one takeaway from this is, if you have an application for it, jump in. But if you don't shoehorn it into everything. It will be really painful. And yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for listening.